What's up, guys? On today's episode, I'm going to show you how to wire up and install an aftermarket radio in a 1994 to 2004 Mustang. Alright, so real quick, just before we get started, I went ahead and installed a Kenwood aftermarket receiver. It has Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, Pandora, Spotify, pretty much all the normal stuff, but I'm going to be running Power Tour this summer with this car, and I don't know that I'm going to have cell phone reception all the places that I'm headed, so I don't know that my cell phone's going to work for navigation. So this unit that I installed also has navigation built into it. It's Garmin navigation, works well. I haven't had too many issues with it so far, but I'm definitely going to put it to the test this summer. If you guys have a 94 to 2000 car that has the two single DIN radios, basically the CD players down here in the bottom, and then there's another single DIN basically radio receiver in the top, Metra actually makes a new entire trim bezel for this whole area that will convert this whole thing over to a double DIN. So there won't be any switches down here like this, and this opening will fit a double DIN radio. I'll link it down in the description. I'll link obviously like the install kit that I use down in the description. But with that, I'm going to take you guys through how I got this thing wired up, where I mounted and how I mounted my microphone for making phone calls, and my GPS antenna and that sort of stuff. Full disclosure, this is the first one I ever did. I didn't really have too many issues, but I did make a couple of mistakes, and I document it in the video, so hopefully you guys don't make the same mistakes I did. But with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. Alright, to get started, I'm going to take the shift knob off. Eventually. Alright, once you get the shift knob off, this piece of trim will just pop up. Pop out. We got a wire back in the back for the cigarette lighter. Make sure you disconnect that. Don't just, manhandle this thing and rip the wire out. That'll come out just like that. Set that off to the side. Some people do this with their fingers. I use a trim tool. It's a little bit easier on your fingers. You're just going to come around and pop this up all the way around the outside. Go. Once you have this out and loose, you're going to have 3 plugs on the back side for the rear defrost, the traction control, and the fog lights if you have a GT or a Cobra. I'm going to do the 3 plugs. All the clips for these plugs are on the right hand side. And set that off to the side. Alright, now that your trim bezel's out of the way, you got 2 7mm bolts down here on the bottom of the radio. Go ahead and zip those out. Put those in the cup holder, and there you go. The stock radio is there. There are 3 connections on the back side, one for the antenna, the subwoofer, and then the main wiring harness. So once you get your original head unit removed from the vehicle, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating the wiring harness to go from the vehicle side. So the vehicle is going to plug into this plug, and then this is then going to adapt the vehicle to the new head unit. The kit that I'm using, it's a Metra kit. I'll link it down in the description. Comes with these 2 connectors, and it comes with this connector as well. This is for a power antenna, so if you have a Panther platform vehicle, a Crown Vic, a Grand Marquis, or a town car, you'll need this to make the antenna work. I don't have a power antenna, I'm not using it. The other thing that you're going to need as far as the wiring is going to be a step down resistor. So This aftermarket head unit has a 12 volt output to the subwoofer. Ford only uses a 5 volt, so you get a pop whenever the aftermarket head unit's turned on, or you change the station or anything like that. So this is basically just a resistor, but it's fairly cheap. I'll link it down in the description as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create this harness, and then I'm going to walk you guys through basically wire by wire what goes where. But basically it's all kind of laid out for you. So your head unit will have a wiring diagram, and then the back of the Metro kit, the back of the bag, will have a definition for what each wire does. So like for example, the red is the ignition wire, and you can look at the back of this Metro bag, and 12 volt ignition is the red wire. So you connect red to red. So you basically got to go through and do that for every wire between the two harnesses. So I'm going to do that real quick off camera, and then I'll bring you guys back in a second. Once I have everything done, I have the resistor, you know, put into the harness, and I'll show you how everything gets laid out and connected. All right, so I'm going to break the wiring up into two parts just so it's a little bit easier to try and digest. First part is going to be real simple. The way everything worked out for my setup is I just matched the colors. So running down the list real quick, the red wire is going to be a 12 volt switched power from the ignition switch. The yellow wire is going to be a 12 volt constant power. The orange wire is going to be a headlight switch. So when you turn your headlights on, the screen and everything's going to dim when the headlights are on. Now the rest of these are all speaker wires. So one's positive and one's negative. So the negative has a black stripe. The positive is just a solid. So that's one speaker. Here's these two are another speaker. These two are another speaker, and these two are another speaker. So get through that, and then we'll go into the second part. As you can see, I don't have the ground and everything connected yet. One other thing to note is on my Kenwood receiver, there's a bunch of other stuff on here that I'm not going to use. They've got options for like backup cameras and stuff like that. So you need like a reverse switch from, you know, the vehicle. There's another wire on here for steering wheel buttons. I don't have any of that stuff. So I just twisted everything up, put some shrink tube on it, and it's just going to hang out in the dash and not get used. So the only real wires I have left is there's a couple grounds, and this blue one and with a white stripe is going to be the power to the amplifiers. This is the one that's going to get spliced into with the resistor to knock down the voltage coming out of the receiver from 12 volts to 5 volts so you don't get the pop. This is going to be the second part of the wiring. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your resistor out of the kit and splice that to the blue with a white trace using the blue with the white trace on the resistor. Now this is on the radio side. So blue with the white trace to blue with the white trace. Then you're going to grab your Metro adapter out of the kit. This is what's going to go to the subwoofer. So you're going to take the blue with the red trace and solder that to the blue with the white trace on the Metro kit. So all you're doing is you're putting this in between the aftermarket radio and the factory wiring harness. The last thing you're going to do, and I haven't connected it yet, so it's just so it's a little bit clearer for you guys to see it and it's not all one big jumbled mess of wires, is this is a ground. So the ground, you're going to attach all three of these, the two black with the white traces on the Metro harness to this. These will all get tied together, and these two both will get tied together over here. So all this stuff is going to go together, and that's the wiring completed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do all this. The one thing I do have here is I have some Tessa tape. If you guys don't have it, I highly recommend it. It's very, very nice stuff. Gives it a very factory look when you're done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder all this stuff together and then clean up this harness just so it's not a giant mess of wires, and then tape it up with some Tessa tape so it looks somewhat factory. Alright, so I'm going to run you guys through real quick and show you just some of the other wiring associated with my install, because I'm sure a lot of this stuff is common between basically any manufacturer of head unit. So I have a Kenwood, it's a navigation unit, and I have a GPS antenna wire here. I have a speaker wire here for, you know, making phone calls, and then I also have 2 USB connections that I wired into my console. So I took out my factory, 12 volt outlet and put in that USB adapter. The wires run through the bottom of the console. I just pushed them through. I didn't even have to pull the console out of the car. Ran them up, ran them behind the shifter, behind this bracket back here, and then popped them up through. My microphone I mounted up here in the headliner. You can take this piece of trim off. You just pull straight down on it. There's 2 clips here, another clip here. It'll just pop off. And then there's just enough room that you can run the wire down the A-pillar and just squeak it underneath the dash. And I have it zip tied back in the back of the dash back here, and then it runs down into the center console where it plugged into the radio. This next thing I did was probably the biggest mistake that I made of the whole install. My original intention was to take my GPS wire and mount it back here, back in the rear deck, up underneath the carpet, and stick it back there, up out of the way, and make sure it had good reception. Well, basically, to make a long story short, you cannot extend the GPS wires at all. These are shielded wires, and there's no way to extend them. I looked for aftermarket kits that make extensions for these things. I couldn't find anything. So the best place that I found to mount this thing is either going to be one of 2 places. Either on this metal tube right behind the gauges, or you can do what I did. No. All right, so the way I actually routed my GPS antenna was, I pushed it up through naturally, but it comes up here back behind the gauges, and you can see the wire right here in my hand. And what I did was I actually double-sided taped it to the top side of the vent right here. So it's actually on the top of this piece of plastic inside the dash. You just reach your arm through and you can reach it no problem. To me, that's probably going to be the best, quickest, and easiest way to mount it, especially because you're going to have to get the gauges out anyway to be able to put the speaker up in the corner if you want it out of the way. What the instructions told me to do was double-sided tape it directly to the top of the dash. To me, that's not an option. So that's how I did it. Like I said, I'm by no means an expert at this, but it's clean, it works, and it does what it needs to do. All right, so this is the wiring harness that we just made. So all I did was I test fitted it, plugged everything in, plugged the head unit in, turned everything on, made sure everything worked, and it did. Once I knew that it worked, took it back out, and I wrapped everything in Tessa tape. For those of you that aren't aware, Tessa tape is sort of like a felt tape that manufacturers use to protect wiring and that sort of thing. I think it just makes your install look a little bit cleaner. I don't think you really need it, but if you want it to look good and look somewhat professional, it's probably something you should look into. I'll link it down in the description for any of you guys that are interested. But yeah, from here on out, it's basically just a simple matter of plug and play and getting everything back reassembled. So I'm going to get to it. Once you get your wiring all figured out and kind of have a plan as to what you're going to be doing, go ahead and assemble your install kit. I'm not really going to detail this. They're very simple. There's I think like 3 whole pieces to this thing, and they're just plastic. There's nothing really to it, but the instructions will vary depending on whether you're using a single DIN, double DIN, and the type of radio that you're using. But really, once you have all this stuff wired and assembled, it's really just a matter of plugging everything in. So the USBs, my instructions tell me to tape them up just to keep them from falling out, so I'm going to have to come back and get that in a second. So this stuff I'm not using. These are for cameras, but that's it. So now you got to try and shove all this stuff inside the dash and get the trim and everything put back together. I'm going to go ahead and zip the gauges back in it, and then I'll bring you guys back once it's working. Alright guys, so that's how you install aftermarket head unit in a 94 to 04 Mustang. I'm running all stock speakers with this thing. It's just the stock Mach 460 sound system in it. I'm not a huge audiophile. It does what I need it to do. And I basically just wanted a functioning CD player, functioning Android Auto, you know, Apple CarPlay, Pandora, Spotify, that sort of thing. It's a huge upgrade from the non-working 6-disc in-dash CD changer that was originally in here from 2001. And like I told you earlier in the video, I am going to be running Power Tour with this thing. I'm planning on doing all 7 days. I'm going to long haul it from Norwalk, Ohio, all the way and end up in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm going to be using the heck out of this thing come June, and hopefully I don't have any issues with it. If I do, I'll let you guys know down in the comments. I'll have links to the wiring harness, the adapters, a couple different head units if you guys are interested. I'll link this one in particular if you guys are interested in it. But yeah, with that, if you guys like the video, as always, go down, hit like. If you want to see more content, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, guys.